Shifting focus now, it was exactly 25 years ago that Vladimir Putin was first elected as Russia's president. A rise to power that was quick and unexpected. And just months after entering politics, he outperformed established leaders who had spent years building their reputations. And today, as he finishes 25 years in power, let's reflect on why Putin gained such strong support from the Russian people and how he revived Russia. And that's following the Soviet Union's collapse. Now, in 25 years that he has been at the helm of affairs in Russia, Putin has outlasted several Western leaders. He has become Russia's third longest-serving leader. That's after Tsar Nicholas I and Joseph Stalin. Putin has perhaps come a very long way from being a little-known KGB officer. In the lead-up to Russia's 2000 presidential election, 33 contestants submitted their documents. But after the signature collection procedure, only 11 remained. Among them were communist leader Gennady Zyuganov, nationalist Vladimir Zhirinovsky, reformist Grigory Valentsevsky, and the acting president Vladimir Putin. From the start, Putin was the clear front-runner. His popularity had skyrocketed since August 1999, when Boris Yeltsin appointed him as the prime minister. His firm response to militant attacks in Dagestan had strengthened his image as a decisive leader in Russia. And by November, his approval rating had jumped from 21% to 42%. At the time, Russia was struggling. The country was still recovering from the 1998 financial crisis. Inflation was high, unemployment had reached 13%, and 1 in 3 Russians lived below the poverty line. Plus, the war in Chechnya raged on. Despite all these challenges, Putin refused to declare a state of emergency, insisting there was no need for it. On December 31st, 1999, Yeltsin made a surprise announcement. He was resigning, and Putin would take over as the acting president. Within hours, Putin called an emergency cabinet meeting, reassuring the nation that there would be no power vacuum. And by early morning, he was in Chechnya, meeting soldiers, awarding medals, and seeking advice. Unlike other contestants, Putin avoided grand election promises and TV debates. He had said, and I'm quoting here, "Modern election tactics are shameless." He said, "I will not make promises I cannot keep." And he let his actions speak. For him, instead, on election night, the results were uncertain. Because at first, a second round seemed possible, but by 2:49 a.m., with over half the votes counted, it was clear Putin had won in the first round with 52.9% of the vote. For Putin, victory was not just political, it was about ensuring stability for Russia. The country was at a turning point, and he was now in charge of its future. During his early years, Putin strengthened state control by cracking down on oligarchs who had gained power under Yeltsin. Independent media outlets were taken over or shut down. Then, in 2004, he won the re-election. But by this time, opposition voices were already being silenced in Russia. As his second term neared its end, the Russian constitution barred him from running for a third term. But instead of stepping aside, Putin orchestrated a political maneuver that would allow him to retain control and power. On May 7, 2008, Dmitry Medvedev, Putin's hand-picked successor, was elected as the president. The very next day, Medvedev appointed Putin as the prime minister, ensuring that real power remained with him. And over the next 25 years, Putin has been accused of systematically dismantling Russia's political institutions, erasing opposition voices, and consolidating absolute control. Here's how he has maintained his power for the last 25 years. Putin eliminated independent power centers, If you're wondering how, by taking direct control of Russia's regions, governors were no longer elected. They were appointed by the Kremlin. That ensured complete loyalty to him. He also crushed dissent. Every major challenge to his rule was met with repression. Just take a look at the events in Russia when his rule was questioned. First, in 2011, mass demonstrations over election fraud took place in Moscow's Boltiana Square. In 2018, there was backlash against pension reforms. And of course, who could forget the nationwide demonstrations over late Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny's arrest? Then, in 2022, Russian troops entered Ukraine. Demonstrations broke out in Moscow and St. Petersburg. At each turn, Putin responded with arrests, censorship and violence. Critics were allegedly eliminated before they could even become real threats for Putin in Russia. And well, how has he managed to do that? That's through his shadow cabinet. Putin has surrounded himself with a tight circle of loyalists and business allies who have allegedly benefited from state contracts. Meanwhile, there has also been state propaganda that has made attempts to rewrite history, portraying Russia as a nation under constant Western threat, and further reinforcing Putin's image as the country's only defender against the West. Cut to today. On the 25th anniversary of his rule, Putin has agreed to a temporary ceasefire with Ukraine after 3 years of war. But this is not a loss. It's a diplomatic victory for Putin. By making the lifting of sanctions a condition for peace, Putin has strengthened his position while keeping control of the conflict. And the West knows it clearly. It's another calculated move in Putin's decades-long strategy. And it's clearly working.